Welcome to the Bright Room podcast. We interview founders, thought leaders, and everyday pirates to discover new approaches to old problems for a brighter tomorrow.
I still remember when we had changed from prior time recording of the company that was acquired, so where it was really batch in, batch out for presence time that you are in the office, and we changed it to trusted work time and work from anywhere. And I thought my first assumption was, I think this will be liberating, everyone will love it. And I was so wrong because it produced actually a lot of anxiety with a lot of colleagues who said, okay, but how do I then record my time that I'm spending in the company? Because I'm here, I'm paid for spending my time. And it's actually interesting because it's also, it leads to the questions, what are you paid for? Are you paid for sitting in an office, or are you paid for hopefully the contribution?
Hi, my name is Irina. I'm a coach, a psychologist, and the founder of Bright Room. Bright Room is a social network for learning and development. You can imagine it as Udemy, except the classes are happening live and you learn in small group with other people. We believe that in order to solve the really big problems our society is facing today, we need to get really good at working together. And that's a continuous journey of personal development, learning, applying, reflecting, and doing it all over again. So Bright Room is there to make this journey as easy and as engaging as it gets. This podcast was born in a desire to complement our mission of helping people work better together by sharing inspirational stories from people and companies who have an unconventional way of doing and being. So, welcome everyone who's joining us today. We're having what I presume to be a very interesting conversation around performance evaluation strategies with Hans Christian and Felicia from 1023 House. And so, maybe we can just kick it off with introductions, your role in 1023 House, and also just your company, what you do, and what is the purpose behind it.
Billy, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Felicia. I'm a People and Culture Fellow at 1023. And since we don't have positions, but we are working role-based, I have many different roles. I don't want to name them all here. I think it's 10 different ones. One of them is, for example, the Organizational Development Cracker or Learning and Development Fellow. So I'm doing a lot in terms of facilitating workshops and trainings and organizational development, clear the air meetings, very different, for me, very interesting stuff. And I'm a psychologist by training, mother of 2 kids, and passionate horseback rider. Very short, but describing me well.
Amazing.
Yeah, happy for going next. I'll start with your last. I'm a father of 2 kids, pug lover, so we have a little dog. Pharmacist by training, worked in pharma industry basically all my professional life, and then from an external title, using CEO as a title of 1023 Health. Having said that, also in reference to what Feli said, operating in a variety of roles. I think one of my probably most commonly used roles is being foreign minister for the company organization.
Could you say the last part again? Didn't hear it very well. I don't know if that's just me.
I mean, as part of the roles of the organization, one of the roles that I'm fulfilling is basically being foreign minister.
Foreign?
Foreign minister, yeah, minister for foreign affairs.
Okay.
The outside face of the company.
That's what the role is called.
I love your creative name culture. That's amazing. All right, maybe before we go into how your company does performance evaluations and performance management, maybe you can kick off by sharing your perspective on how do you even see the purpose of performance evaluations? Because companies do it for different reasons. I've also found that some companies don't even know why exactly they're doing that. So I'm curious to find out how you see the purpose of performance evaluations.
I'm having two immediate thoughts. So first of all, I think I think a performance review and discussion should be for the respective employee. So it basically should benefit the employee with the sake of feedback to understand where he or she has strength, where they have maybe blind spots, where there's areas of growth, to understand a little bit, maybe get an outside perspective on the performance, on the individual, on the communication style, which finally should enable the individual to learn and grow and take something away from this. And, for example, learning more about strength, learning more about weak spots, and then taking this to the next level for him or herself. But I'm sure Feli will have contributions to that.
Well, I was reminded on the first discussions we had on this. And I remember, this is the fantastic playground we have now, is that we are a young company, a new company, and that we can reinvent everything in a way that it fits our purpose. And the first discussion that we actually had on this performance management topic was asking exactly that question. And I remember I was discussing it with you, Hans Christian, but also with our cultural ambassadors, as we call them. And we said, do we want to have a performance review process in the traditional way? And we said no, because we don't want to distribute our bonus like this. We have a bonus system that is everybody's participating, so we don't have to individually do performance ratings. Do we want to have this window dressing exercise of sitting down once a year and showcasing how wonderful everything was so that I can get some kind of a reward for it? No, that was not the purpose that we wanted to give to that. But then somebody said, actually, the intention was, in the original sense, to sit down and review. How was my year? What did I do right? What was my success? What did not go so well? How could I do it differently? And to learn from that. And as Hans Christian put it, to get feedback, to get a reflection process going. And there we all said, yeah, that's what we want to keep. That's a good intention in it. And that's what we want to keep. And I think when you asked for the purpose in this process in our company, and we don't call it performance management because we don't believe in performance, we say contribution and to our purpose, and we don't believe in management. We say self-responsibility. And so self-evaluations, it was the term which we came up with, how we want to call it. So it's sitting down and reflecting yourself. How was my year? What do I want to change?
Okay, so if I understand correctly, your purpose of self-evaluation is, first of all, to support the growth of the individual. So it's not so much evaluation per se, it's more of a reflection, like a guided reflection process that people can go through in order to achieve their goals within the organization.
To even set the goals, that's also important. We do believe it's important to work with OKRs, with objectives and key results, and to set goals for yourself. This is a very good way to structure yourself, and also to review how did it work then, and also to have this holding point of reflection, to look back, did my plan really come true or not? What do I learn from that and whatnot? And also to choose, we call it sounding partner. So you don't have to work with we call it circle lead. You don't have to go to in other organizations, you would say line manager, we say circle lead. You don't have to do this conversation with your circle lead. You can also choose another colleague, somebody from another circle, a customer. You can ask the relevant stakeholders that are important in your.
Okay. So now that we're kind of in it, maybe you can share a little bit more about like the whole practical side of this self-evaluation. How does it actually look like? If I were to join your team and you were to kind of explain to me, okay, Irina, this is how it works here.
So the idea is, of course, if you join us newly, you have some time to get onboarded, to get going in your role. So we also say, maybe take a couple of months and then, but don't wait too long, because it's not about I need to be perfect in my job before I get a self-evaluation or before I get feedback. No, it's along the way. It is important, but settle in, get onboarded, and then we have a template that is called self-evaluation, and that is asking a couple of questions. So, for example, how would you rate yourself in terms of collaboration? because we don't believe that it's only about performing or contribution. It's also how do you do that. And then you have a scale from 1 to 10 and you rate yourself and say, okay, I'm new here maybe, so I'm not as satisfied with myself how I networked in the first 2 months, so that I could even get better or something like that, so that you start to think about how satisfied am I with myself regarding my expectations towards myself. And then the second question is about contribution. And then there are a couple of more questions about role fit, about successes. So what am I proud of? What did I achieve? What are my strengths? Also, what did I not achieve? Where would I like to grow? So that you celebrate the successes and also take the learnings from what didn't work out too well. And that you always also think about, are my roles still fitting? Since we're working role based, it's also a good opportunity to think about, am I still in the right roles, or did I grow out of one? Do I want to become more responsible in something? Do I want to change? Or is there something that I just don't like doing? I realize when I'm thinking about it, and maybe I would like to take that to a governance meeting and ask my team if somebody else can take that over. Christian,
Okay.
what did you forget? The sounding partners, probably.
And maybe to your question is, when you enter the organization, obviously we do have then also a description of the process, which we call framework and relevant templates that aim to facilitate a little bit how to run through that process in a structured way, together obviously with, let's say, the sounding partner, or to accompany someone through the kind of process, because it's probably a little unconventional, to say the least. If you're joining the company and you're probably used to more traditional, your line manager has a conversation with you, and then they will put you into 3 or 6 or 9 grid or 4 categories or 5 categories of performance, which determine your bonus. That exactly is not the goal for us. The focus should be on the individual, and with the process, it should be really a guided journey through basically helping to self-evaluate, and then also, focus a little bit on the feedback. And I would also say, with the feedback, I mean, in more traditional organizations, and performance ratings may or may not include 360 feedbacks, but frankly saying, often they may also not be very, let's say, well-meaning, maybe in the best way. So the question is really, is that always on the best intent for the individual, and it should aim to really reflect a little bit of how you come across and what perception do you create by how you operate and come across, etc. So that generally should feed kind of the journey and the process to help the individuals.
And who would I then choose my sounding partner, or is that assigned?
It's a very important step in this process, because it also puts the responsibility, the fellow or the employee, as you would call it, to really choose the right people to give feedback. And we just give this framework, as Hans Christian just said. So we wrote the process down in a framework, and we, for example, say you should do your self-evaluation at least once a year. Absolutely invite you to do it more often, but at least once a year, and at least with 2 sounding partners. But of course, you can choose more. And these people should be people that you get, of course, insights from. So if it's like your best buddy that you're very close with, and that is very honest with you, then this is a good source. If it's your best buddy that you're already talking with anyways a lot, and will probably not give you any constructive feedback or anything new to add to your perspective, and then it might not be the right sounding partner. So we invite people to choose the sounding partners that they think they get the most information from, that is helpful for their development.
And who then gets visibility into this self-reflection process? Is that something that stays purely for the purpose of this individual, or is that gonna shared, discussed in any group setting?
So far, we believe that it's the best way, that it's not sent to HR. We have been asked a lot, do I need then to send the template when it's filled out to people in culture? And we say, no, it's for you. It's for your growth. It's nothing that we want to control. We did want to really give a little push to everybody to really do it. And so we have an Excel where also the people themselves put their names in. So yes, I did it. I did it on the date with 2 people, and so that it's control light, I would call that, so that there is a process that is also making it transparent who already did it. Yes, there is transparency, and the access is for given to everybody. It's granted to everybody in the organization. Everybody can see that file, but there is the content and the templates that stay with the people, because then we believe it's more honest.
Yeah, and the individual can obviously choose then to take the information to some other colleagues and to discuss it, further, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I mean, one outcome of the self-assessment or performance discussions could also be that your own individual growth plan, so like a development activities, maybe subsequently be derived from that, and that basically means. Then I think in these cases it may or may not be the case that there's additional people getting involved anyway. So then, I mean, and this could be a lot of things. Growth can be on a variety of factors. You take on additional roles, or you want to have, basically learning by experience, learning by education, exposure, or shadowing and mentoring, and there's coaching. There's a ton of different activities that could be a result of such a conversation. And in many cases, obviously, this includes costs, and that's why we basically also have defined ourselves, let's say, a threshold where this is typically fine for the individuals to drive that forward. Other than that, it would basically also require to be part of a budgeting process and finance planning of that. I don't think we have anyone currently that basically is in an MBA program that is, 6-digit expense for the company at this point of time. At least I don't think so, Feli. But that's where basically, there may be subsequent activities that fall on the individual to also follow up on.
Yeah, especially this question that is going into the role fit is then often linked to this individual growth plan, which is another process that we offer to all our employees to do a profile dynamics, which is a profiling that is very strength oriented. And then it becomes often very clear why somebody says, maybe I really don't like these very detailed work in the lab, very standardized, very SOP driven, standard operation procedure driven. Because, and then you see that in the profile, because the value drivers of this person are going into a different direction. This person might be more yellow, they're working with the color coding, more looking into innovation, into freedom, into different stuff. And then this is not a good match. This person could still be successful in that role, but it would be energy draining. And it would be kind of a waste of potential, because the person would be a lot better in a role where more yellow is required. And the people enjoy, I think, this individual growth plan conversations a lot, because it's very strength oriented and it gives ideas and inspiration to apply for different roles.
Yeah. In general, what are you seeing from your employees? So it's a completely kind of self-driven process for self-benefit, essentially. How many people do actually go through this process? How often do they choose to go through this process? Like, if you can share any data.
I would probably say it depends. I think it depends a little bit on the person and the personality, and I think Feli can chime in with the numbers, because I think it's a little bit unconventional at the first sight. That's why I think there's probably a little bit of a natural hesitancy for some colleagues to undergo that kind of process, and I think that may actually be related to prior experiences. Now, I mentioned in my introduction, I've been working in corporate pharma basically all my life, and I've seen a lot of interesting performance reviews where people got bad ratings because budget needed to be saved or whatever, for whatever reasons. And then I heard once a line manager saying, "Oh, let's give this guy a bad rating. He just built a house. He will not leave us. It doesn't matter." Really bad stuff that I experienced, and that's where I think many people are. Let's say always a little bit you know, maybe biased, let's say, when they jump into a performance management review because not knowing what will happen to this data. Like, for example, to your question, will we submit this to HR? Will will we then end up in a category, blah, 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 blah. And the idea is really, I mean, is also from a good intent perspective that I think, first of all, you need to build the trust in a new organization. And when you join an organization, I think everything is honeymoon period. I think trust will not be a question of day one. So you probably have to build the trust that this is basically seriously meant for yourself. And what will be the benefit for yourself as an individual will be the benefit for the company. Because if you work in your strength, in your passion, then you work, more productively and with less energy drain. And that's where I think there has been, I think, a level of confusion. Also, when we rolled it out, there were a ton of questions, and it's rightfully so. I mean, it's not surprisingly so that people have been, colleagues have been a little bit confused here and there. I think we've been with, after a few reminders from our people and culture team, I think we are basically have almost reached everyone who's not yet in that onboarding phase, probably, where people are too recent in the company and basically have other things. But to overcome your inner hurdle, actually be opening up to that kind of process itself, I think is in my view our first task as an organization. Billy, I don't know if you want to.
So it's
add.
taking people some time to see it as something truly meant for their development and not having any hidden agenda that they might have had experienced in the past.
I would say that, and obviously, it's also, you could always fall into the bias and saying, I know myself. Why should I talk to anyone else? And if this is only for myself, how much priority is this? Right? I have a lot of real work to do. So why do I have to talk to anyone about how I come across or something like that? Well, obviously, it makes you more efficient and it drains you a lot more energy, and you could maybe talk to people where you have had challenging communication situations to maybe unfold that. So I think to discover that this will help you grow and become more effective and more happy even in your work day, I think will require a little bit of level of maturity and recognition and letting go of past biases.
Speaking of maturity, one of the things that I would imagine, I don't know if that's a challenge at all, but one of the things that came up for me is I would imagine like this kind of process would require a lot of maturity also just from the perspective that you need to actively come and ask someone for feedback. And I could imagine that this process could be difficult for a lot of people, especially if they have recently joined and maybe they feel insecure, and then like really come and ask for feedback from someone they know could provide constructive feedback rather than just someone that they feel comfortable talking to could be like the first maybe hurdle to overcome. What's your experience in that?
It's absolutely true. It is. It's kind of a threshold to start for the first time. That's also exactly what we experienced from the people. They often said, I really was not that easy to do it the first time. But after doing it the first time and also maybe being asked by somebody else to be their sounding partner, it's like with everything. If you did it the first time and after that it becomes more of a habit and I know what's coming. It becomes more of a routine, but it needs to be practiced and it needs to be, as Hans Christian said, this trust thing, that it's really working, and that even if there is a constructive feedback, that this is in the end bringing the people closer together, because it brings authenticity to the table, because there is more honesty, because in the end I can rely more on you if I know I get an honest feedback from you. And then it's not about window dressing, not about wearing a mask at work and trying to be somebody else that I'm not. It's about, I know, maybe even, I know I'm not really good at that. I would like to improve that. Or maybe I would like to shift to a role where I can more leverage my actual strength. And that to come to that point, and that's what I also meant to give it a little push in the beginning. Yes, to make it mandatory was important for us, because with freedom comes responsibility. we give a lot of freedom to the people, we take a lot of freedom ourselves in this organization. And with that comes a lot of responsibility too. And one of them is to ask for feedback and to develop and grow yourself and self-reflect.
And maybe just to add, I would definitely totally agree to what you said, Feli. The one addition I would make is that feedback and psychological safety and having trust at the workplace is not only a question for a company like ours, which is fairly small and like a small medium-sized enterprise and just growing, etc. I do think it's the fundamental of the general workplace. I mean, if you don't have a workplace where you can give feedbacks to other people, where you cannot ask a question openly and you don't feel that psychological safety, I think it will be always an energy drain. Now, is that a muscle that is very trained with a lot of people in most workplaces? Probably not. So it requires basically always a little bit of risk taking from the individual to actually keep trying. And I think it's a journey too, because giving feedback is very hard. I mean, it's not so easy, and it's also a question of how you give feedback. I mean, you will not go to someone and then say, "Oh, this was really terrible," blah blah blah. I think you have to think about how you give and transport that feedback. That's, for example, also for our communication trainings. That's where we are trying to, have some basic trainings on nonviolent communication equipped with everyone being equipped with that, to basically think about observation and what is this doing to me, my emotions, and what are my needs, and not jumping to a conclusion and saying, oh, you've done that, and I assume your intention was this and this, and then you start with a scenario play in your mind, and you're short. I mean, brains are short-wired for good reasons, because otherwise we couldn't take on the whole data of what's happening in the world. But sometimes we have to be really thoughtful of the short wiring, and stop and just briefly reflect and saying, okay, what does that with me? And then going into a feedback, which is then also, genuine, well-meaning, and then also mindful in its communication as well. But I think it's a fundamental rule for any organization. If you struggle on feedback culture, trust, and open dialogue, I think it will become challenging.
Okay, so you supported by a lot of training, as far as I understand, for the specific kind of ways of how to communicate, but I'm sensing there's also a lot about just personal growth in general.
Feli, you want to give a little bit of flavor of all these things we do?
A lot pops into my mind on that one, because I think that the way we try to work, these new ways of working, and this holocracy, or the mix that we are trying here, it requires a lot of self-reflection, and it requires a lot of self-development. For example, we do not work with titles, so we don't have senior vice presidents or directors. We rather ask the question to the people, what does career mean to you? And which kind of role mix do you need to flourish and to be happy and to fulfill your purpose? And this all requires a lot of introspection, a lot of growth, a lot of development. But that's exactly what we believe in is important, and also to make, I don't want to make this too philosophical, but to make this world a better world, and to also to truly think about things like sustainability differently, and to think about your impact on the rest of the world and the environment. It starts with introspection and with self-reflection, and we want to trigger that a lot. And in the end, I truly believe it makes you a lot happier, because you don't buy into belief sentences that you have learned maybe in childhood or in school, and that successful means to earn a shitload of money and to be a certain title or something. But you, on the journey to that, you forget who you are and what you really want. And that I have seen that a lot in coachings, especially in terms of burnout and other topics, that people are following paths that are not their own anymore, because they are just driven by other belief sentences. And I think we want to create something different here.
Well, sounds beautiful. If I may jump back into a bit of the practical side of it, I guess like the multiple like the ways that a lot of organizations use performance evaluations, performance management is, well, hopefully the fundamental reason that you've described. So for the growth, for the purpose of growth of the individual, but then there is also the resource allocation in terms of like bonuses and promotions. And then there is the identifying underperformance and exceptional performance and all this kind of stuff. So you briefly mentioned the second component of the bonuses, that you have a system where you share it based on the contribution. Could you maybe speak a little bit more to that, how it is actually being done for the bonuses and the promotions?
I can start on the compensation, and I do believe that let's say performance ratings with individual bonuses and individual goals bear a significant risk of salifications. And there's actually a great new study from St. Gallen as well on the risk of individual bonuses and how that works for, let's say, traditional conveyor belt work, but maybe not so much for today's work, because basically maybe even anti-incentivized collaboration, etc. So the way that our salary structure currently works is that we have base salaries, plus we do have variable salaries. The variable salaries would be dependent on how well the company is doing. So, for example, if the company has done, financially well in year 2023, 2024, we would basically rate a bonus and distribute that to all the employees. Equally, we think that we want to include employees also in the long-term value creation. So that's why, for example, also once a year we invite everyone into becoming a shareholder of 1023. Because we're not a publicly traded company, so you cannot buy our shares in the market, but our employees we invite actually to become equity and shareholders to even think about this as a long-term journey. So that's basically from a compensation scheme. We do then have obviously also a range of benefits that align with, let's say, I would also say the fundamental beliefs and the values of our company when it comes to things like public transport. We support public transport. We have health benefits, etc. We have and I like that we have sustainability benefits where we are supporting individuals with personal CO2 footprint assessments and offsetting activities, etc. But that basically is equally applies to all. Now, I think since you said about promotion, how do you reward promotions? The question is, what is required for you to be appreciated? So, what is a promotion? And that I think goes back to what Feli said: is a promotion a new title? Okay, you can have that if you want to do that at 1023. Just put in order a new stack of business cards. It's yours. Some people then I've seen came forward and also said, I want to have a merit increase. I think I'm warranted, etc., which I think is great. I've seen that rarely. I've had one case, and that's to me a perfect example. We have one colleague, and he grew from being in the lab, from being a lab technician, into a sales business development person. And he's really a great communicator, can really well communicate, also on technical expertise, etc. So he's fantastic as a business developer, and he's doing so well in all the business development team in our business circle. So the question I had to him is saying, I think you do a fantastic job. What do you think? How would you feel appreciated most? What do you want? What do you need to be appreciated? And he sent me an email the next day afterwards and said he thought a lot about it. And he said by just me telling him that I really appreciated him for how he get into the new role and job and how well he's doing, he already got a lot of kicks out of that. But that's where I think the key question is, how do you feel appreciated? And there's people who feel appreciated by saying thank you and great job. Some people think maybe I want a check connected to that, or I feel better with that. So I think it will be a very individual response also on what you need from feeling valued. And I think recognition, appreciation has been a topic I think that came up in our employee survey also last year. So we've been thinking a lot about recognition and how we recognize people, which I think is to me a better term compared to performance rewarding. And recognition always relates to good performance, and that's where we have various means. I mean, we have recognition in public recognitions in our Slack channel, for example, or other means. But I think it's very individual. But that's just for the fundamental concept of we do salary and appreciation. Feli, did I forget anything specifically?
No, I think I really like this part that you also touched, this giving choices, and because recognition and reward means something different for almost everybody, and many people might say it's about financial recognition or money, but what I experience is really this, what you also said in your story. It's about appreciating somebody honestly and not saying, oh yeah, clap on your shoulder, you did a good job. But truly, this was amazing for me, how you did that. And it was great to see that you did that also in a very nonviolent communication way. So you can do this in a constructive feedback, but you can do it in the same way for an appreciation. So to be very concrete, what was it, what you did there, what made me feel so great in this situation? And this is very rewarding for many people. And then to, even if it's about material or financial support, to ask the people, what do you need? Would you like to have a voucher to go to a restaurant with your partner? Would you like us to plant 100 trees for you? Or which is it? And then the people can choose. And this is, I think, a good way to give a choice here.
Okay.
And the risk is also of this performance rewarding. It also needs to make sure, in my view, that you don't discredit someone else for the performance you give someone, which I think is a little bit the challenge in some of the historical systems, which assume that the reward is always money and the title, and it will be limited. Title will be limited to two promotional titles a year, blah blah blah, and this is your distribution curve for how you did. So basically, you have to take money here to give it to these people. And that's where I think it's always a little bit a tricky conversation to start off with. That's why I think the performance and the recognition should be always on the individual, and I think very case specific, without the necessity of discrediting, someone else. And it's not because otherwise it builds always a very brutal competitive environment also within an organization. And it should be about collaboration and not competition.
And I think that's one of the pitfalls of some traditional performance systems, is because it always goes to restricted resources and makes it limited. And from my experience, if you have a great culture and high performing teams, this is infectious. So others also get better when you have a good culture, a good team culture, performance driven way of thinking in a team, then the others also get engaged and motivated. And for me, it doesn't make sense to then say, yeah, but you're not as good as the other one, so we only have limited resources and we need to make a forced distribution curve and lower your rating because somebody else needs to be rated higher. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it can be quite demotivating if you're just have to be forced somewhere, and basically you have a limit to how many people can be great or not be great, but can be recognized as great. So you have a fixed salary and then you have a variable salary that is equal distribution of the excess that the company makes. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, more or less. So basically, if the company does well, we have a bonus. It's not. Don't think it's not to be mistaken with the linear scheme that all the excess would go into a distribution, and I think that would also assume that. I mean, we even have paid bonuses when we were not profitable as an organization. So you could argue, why do you pay a bonus? But that's why there's no linear relation to it. Has been that you distribute all the profitability in it. But generally speaking, that's why I said when the company does well, we distribute.
But do you distribute it equally for all employees, or is it like, okay, this person gets this percentage and then this person gets this percentage?
Yes, so I think the way we look at this right now, and I think we are, let's say, overhauling or in the process of overhauling anyway our merit increase system. So on how we change and adapt salaries over the year, where we also want to move more into self-empowerment, that colleagues basically would ask themselves for, do I want to have a raise, salary increase? and or not. Maybe you also opt out. I mean, I know our leadership team has opted out for the last 2 years, and we said let's just opt out of a salary increase because then there's more budget left for everyone else. Because at some point the financial resources are limited. And in course of that project for new salary increase, we are basically currently, let's say, thinking about different family of roles, I would probably call it, if that's the right term. Clearly, maybe you have a bit better term, where basically the bonuses would be more clearly linked to a specific role or role combination that you have as an employee and incumbent. So yes, there is a different degree and percentage of the variable pay depending on role, responsibility, impact, etc., etc. But basically, that will, I think, become a little bit more formalized in the future with our family approaches.
Okay, so it's still in progress to
I mean,
to figure out
yeah,
how exactly.
I think for the merit increase, we haven't. I don't think we have had an ideal concept in the past year. So, for example, when also you have salary adaptations, I think the focus in the past 2 years was to make sure that there's no gender pay gap, which historically there has been, frankly saying, and so also, I mean, we made an acquisition and then have hired new people. So basically, you have a pool of information of the people in your organization. So I think the first focus was to make sure that it's just and that we have, let's say, equity and equality considerations for the way we operate. And as I said, I think especially gender pay gap was very high on our radar. I think we are basically past that, so I think there's no gender pay gaps being left, and so we've been talking a lot about how to make it fair and just for salary increases, because you don't want to increase salaries only to, again, you don't want to increase distribute it only to the performance category A. We don't have that anyway, or you don't want to distribute it only to the people who shout loudest. That would be very unfair, which is typically also not female, not a typical female trait. So, I mean, that's where I think we're right now in the middle of defining a new process, and I think looking at a lot of new pay initiatives and how we can actually evolve the concept further. I mean, but I think the fundamental concept of a variable pay and the base pay and equity pay, equity part, I think that is here to remain. To me, it's more also the question is how do you evolve your salary over the course of your work life.
For us, it's also important to, we are not operating in a separate universe. I mean, we need to stay competitive in terms of salary, and that's why we also sometimes feel a little bit the pressure to still work with bonuses and stuff like to be able to connect with the job market. And when we have applicants asking how much bonus would I get in that position, then we cannot start a discussion about working role based and that it depends on the responsibility and that it might change. There, I think it's sometimes a challenge for us to stay competitive, to stay also with our job descriptions in the language of the job market, and at the same time doing it differently and in a very innovative and different way in our daily life. So that we have to sometimes also build bridges and see how fast we can change things.
Yeah.
I think I would also say the linkage to the outside world, and it's also to learn, because I think we've been early on even defining some frameworks outside of the performance and or feedback activities, and I think we've had a lot of pivoting actually during some of the discussions where we said, okay, maybe it goes too far, it's too difficult to understand, maybe it's too much right now for the organization, for everyone, because maybe we're too far off from how actually the world out there does it. And that basically has been also good learning in my view, is that we've been also able to adjust processes. So that's why I do think it's an evolution and a journey. And that's a fundamental trait of how we want to be as an organization too, is to learn and grow.
And I think there are also many dependencies. For example, we talked a lot to people, or to smaller, especially smaller consultancies or smaller organizations that are working with self-setting salaries. And that we got a lot of feedback also that this, again, depends on the maturity of the team and the conflict solving resources that are there. So this is a very hot topic that goes easily very emotional. So if you think about very advanced new pay concepts like self-setting salaries, you need to ensure that you have a good basis for that, a good maturity stage, so that you can resolve conflicts and work well with feedback.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking as you were sharing this process. I thought two things. First of all, it is such a delicate thing in terms of like equity and inclusion, because on one hand, this self-driven process it sounds amazing. I mean, I think it is the future of how it's supposed to, of how performance reviews should go. But at the same time, you need to ensure certain fundamentals and I think collectively maybe we're not there yet, and who knows how long it's gonna take to get there, considering the gender norms and how, if we were just talking about men and women advocating for themselves, and we're just not socialized in the same way. So what's okay for a man is not perceived, and hence there is also no skill to really like do it in most cases, unless people have purposefully worked on building that skill. And then there's whole kind of idea of self-worth, which is separate to gender topic, and it's just so nuanced and individual. So it seems like there are so many components that need to be present to make sure that this system actually making things more equitable in the end of the day.
And what Hans Christian said, I think it's really it's an evolution, and you need to see, you consciously need to do retrospectives with the organization and see at what maturity level are we, where do we struggle, what are priorities right now, can we go the next steps in terms of innovative ideas that we have, or do we have to also let the things that we implemented sink in for a while and let the people try out, work with self-evaluations, for example, try it out, experience it, and then come with the next step. And we work a lot with the safe to try and then learn from it. And maybe we sometimes go 2 steps too far, and then we have to wait a little and then see how it's resonating with the organization, and then find a different way or wait a little.
Okay.
But that also comes back to the ability for feedback and communication, right? I mean, as we talked earlier, is that basically it only works if then there's feedback from an individual and saying, okay, I don't feel comfortable. And it's very sensitive. And again, also to what you said, Irina, you have to be brave enough, and maybe you're not doing that because you're introvert or you were not educated, or it was, trained away by centuries of patriarchy. There's many aspects to it. So that's why I think it's. I think the roadmap, I think, is clear. I think the vision is clear where we want to go. I think the journey is a tricky one, and the journey is a long one.
Yeah.
And it's okay to go back if you found yourself to be going too far, and then go back and take a different route. That's okay.
Okay, so your approach is experiment, evaluate, adjust, and recycle. Would you be open to share some of the things that maybe you tried to implement and that was too far, and you got pushback from the teams and you had to rethink it? Or something that maybe you were worried about, but then actually that went really well and was very easily adopted? Like, any stories to share?
Quite some, I would say. The self-evaluation themselves are a good example. I mean, we started, we put the framework out and had 2 info sessions. We always work in German and English, so we had 2 different info sessions. And then we thought, like, yeah, now it's going to start. It didn't. We had to do more communication. We had to explain more. We had created a role called feedback fans, so that in every circle we have a feedback fan that is a little more trained and knows a little more, has a little more information on the process, and can be asked. Also for new people, because we are growing so fast, we also have to consider how to onboard the people. And that already helped a lot, to have a personal contact in the circle who you can ask. And then we had some interviews with people who did it, and shared this with our wonderful communication person in our organization. She put out these interviews, and then people that could be related to told their story. For me, the self-evaluation, I was not a big fan to start with that, because I had a lot of work to do, and there was an inspection coming and so on. But I did it anyways. And to be honest, guys, it was really amazing, and it helped me a lot. And giving some examples what exactly helped them, and that, then it worked better. So we learned on the way.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that is totally true, and I think that this additional role, plus basically then having spokespeople from across the organization, and people who are kind of early adopters, but then can also be multipliers for this, I think has helped a lot. I'm also thinking when it was about when we pivoted, I still remember when we had changed from prior time recording of the company that was acquired. So where it was really batch in, batch out for presence time that you are in the office. And we changed it to trusted work time and work from anywhere. And I thought my first assumption was, I think this will be liberating, everyone will love it. And I was so wrong, because it produced actually a lot of anxiety with a lot of colleagues who said, okay, but how do I then record my time that I'm spending in the company? Because I'm here, I'm paid for spending my time. And it's actually interesting, because it's also, it leads to the question is, what are you paid for? Are you paid for sitting in an office, or are you paid for hopefully the contribution / performance that you will be eventually making? But I think my takeaway was that also, I think someone said, if I don't do time recording, how can I prove to you or the company how much I worked? Or what do I say to a colleague if I leave at 4 o'clock and my colleague says, oh, it seems like you're not working so much today? How can I answer that if I don't have time recording? And that was actually interesting, because I thought that there's much more underlying fears and anxieties and maybe micro traumata that have been actually cooking. And I had the experience myself. In my first job, when I left at 5:30, a colleague said to me, "Are you taking half a day off?" And that was a traumatic experience. I still know it. I know who said it to me, and I know the situation, and I remember my feelings of that situation. And I was pissed. I was really angry, and I was not outspoken enough back in the day to probably have told him, to mind his own business, and then I should have made a joke and saying, I'm just working better than you because I can get my job done. I can get the job done in 1 hour where you need 2, something like that. But it's like, and that at least for me has caused, I don't like time recording. That has led to my feeling, but it could have maybe also caused a different feeling with me when I said, oh no, I need to work more and I need to record every hour I'm doing, every half hour, to be really the top scorer of overtime. And it is sometimes an unwritten rule in many organizations is that overtime is the KPI. I mean, in one prior company I worked with, 2 group leaders were competing for a resource, and both of them said, I need one more person. And the argument was, and the winner was, which group had more overtime. And the group who won with more overtime, I know the people who worked there, they were told, sit in your office, you can read the newspaper, I know you have nothing to do, but just sit there. You can scroll, you can just burn time, because we need to have that additional resource. So it builds all these strange things in organizations where you actually build in triggers like that. So that's where I'm getting carried away a little bit by the example, but to me the point was really on that work time, and we pivoted in the way that we said, okay, if you want to record your work time, our system allows that. We are using the Personio system. You can do that, but we will not take the data and will not make out of a beauty contest. In contrast, you have to take care that you're not overworking yourself.
Okay, that's interesting. So that leads me to the question, how do you measure contributions?
Feli, you want to start?
We don't. I mean, I think
well, the question is to me: is it individual or organizational?
True. Yeah.
Let's start with individual.
Yeah, because I think to me the individual would be the more tricky one. Actually, as a company, we have OKRs, we have annual goals, we have a lot of KPIs across topics from financial to sustainability to people and culture KPIs, etc. So I think we are basically using monitoring tools and then goals and / OKRs basically for how we drive the organization. So I think the company output is very well steered from how we can make the contribution. We can measure how much companies we supported, how many patients actually, how many units we produce, how many patients this got, etc. So I do think that in all the categories we do that. I think the individual contribution will then be focusing on an individual subset of the KPIs, and then it will become a little bit. I think it will be still very clear on the circle level. So if you measure about how many batches were produced, I mean the contributing team is the operations team at our fifth manufacturing facility. Right? So that's where basically they can measure their contribution. Now, the tricky thing will be if you look at operator 1 to 10, what is their contribution to the individual success will be a little bit more difficult to put in a quantification. And I would probably struggle there. I think generally speaking, I would probably assume that the team knows on who their biggest contributor were from how they are operating, and probably it's not even required for me to actually think about this, but that's where I think the team will probably know, but it will be a little bit more indirect, and it comes to back to the question is what's performance, because you could have 5 operators basically contributing with, let's say, documentation work in the background and some other people filling syringes. Now, is one work more worth than the other? I don't think so. Everyone, the work needs to come together. And similarly for sustainability or people and culture. And that's where I think it becomes a question of what is performance and what is contribution. And people may have different opinions about that. I still remember we had one feedback, which I'm still a little bit emotionally shattered about in an employee survey, where it was said, oh, we need more frontline production people and less people in people and culture and sustainability, which I think led me to reflect about this. And my reflection was, it seems like the contribution on the sustainability and people and culture side is probably not equally recognized by the individual who wrote this, right? And I think for this person, probably performance doesn't mean writing a contract or with a customer, or writing individual growth plan, helping someone in an individual growth plan. To coming back to the performance and growth discussion, or it's about training in nonviolent communication. Is that performance or is that not performance? I absolutely think it's performance, because all of these are components of how we need to operate as an organization. I mean, an organization which just consists of a conveyor belt and you have five people standing there is not going. It's not going to be a company, and it will not be operational and functional. So that's where I think it's going to be a little bit. It's going to be a little bit of a tricky question. We have got a lot of dialogue, I would probably say, on what is performance and contribution, which goes back into the appreciation, recognition. When I ask someone in a large corporate, I was part of a transformation journey last year for a large corporate pharma, and they had a little bit of a discussion about performance reviews as well. And I asked the head of the department saying, why do you do performance reviews? And he exactly answered two things. He said, how do I know who are the good people in my team? So my response to that was, if you don't know that, without filling out an Excel sheets in 9 categories, I think you're in trouble. And then the other thing is that he said, I need to distribute money according to the rules. But yeah, that's, I mean, we talked about that. But that's where I think I'm struggling with this more precise answer probably of the question, Irina.
Yeah. Okay, I guess related to that, but like on a more extreme case, I mean, underperformance happens everywhere. It's quite okay. How do you even identify it? I guess. How do you know that someone is underperforming?
I would like to ask you a question back, Irina. I'm sure you worked in teams so far. How did you see if somebody was performing more or less? How would you know? Do you remember a situation?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's well, I worked with very structured performance evaluation process. So, and it was peer feedback, manager feedback, and self-evaluation. I don't think that anyone has ever put themselves as fully underperforming. So I don't think it has ever happened that someone has independently put them on the performance improvement plan. But so normally it was, I think, a result of peer and managerial feedback that was sometimes more objective, sometimes maybe less objectives, but that there was a formal process to it. Yeah, I think sometimes, I guess that also just comes to this perception of fairness. And sometimes it was perceived fair, sometimes it was not perceived fair. I guess it will never work for everyone. And also, I guess from the perspective of the person who is given this rating, it will take some whether that's true or not, it will take some like I guess personal maturity again to be open to consider that that might be case, and try to understand why that's happening and so on. But I mean, I guess whether it's fair or not and objective or not, in a kind of standard structure where you get in this feedback from people and you have this rating and everything, it's more or less straightforward. But I'm just curious, how do you do it in a system where it's all based on self-evaluation and where you also yourself are setting your objectives? So it's not an objective that's given to you, but you yourself set the objective. So that, I guess, that adds another layer of complexity to how can you assess yourself even personally. You don't only then assess how you are performing towards the objective that you set, but you also need to question, did you set the right objectives for yourself? So that's
Yeah.
kind of the additional.
Maybe
I mean,
just to jump on that directly, to avoid one confusion, because I'm hearing that you're setting yourself goals and there's self-assessments. Yes, but there's also the circle goals and the company goals, and you need to contribute to that
So
equally.
there are
And
some objective
I mean, it's
goals.
like absolutely. So it's not like a self-setting service, which I think can be easily misperceived sometimes in self-organized companies, that you can do whatever you want and it's anarchy. This is absolutely not the case. I mean, you have role accountabilities that are very clearly defined. We are working with the Holy Spirit system. The roles are very clearly defined. You have company and team goals that you achieve, and you have that feedback mechanisms of your colleagues, peers, circle leads, etc. around you. So I think it's probably not that different to your description of a more traditional performance review, that at the end, I think underperformance, to whatever that means, so I would probably say either not contributing effectively to the goal, etc., will be kind of detectable in the organization. I think you will find it, and I think experience goes is that it was. I think we have a variety of cases where these conversations actually happened, where it was about performance. And the root cause can be many. I mean, Feli reference to profile dynamics, and maybe some individual is in the wrong role or in the wrong job, which basically then is a limitation. So the question is, do we find a different role or job? Do we have any other opportunities within the company, etc. So to make a better fit. So which is also a question of a development organization. But there are also cases where you may conclude, or maybe even mutually conclude, and saying, yeah, I've not given everything, and my not being able to give everything can be having a variety of reasons. Maybe I'm not active in that role because the role is not fitting me. I don't have the necessary information. I'm not trained. I was basically, maybe a person was hired into the wrong job, with wrong expectations to be starting off with, and then we've had separations 3 years. And Philly, I'm sorry I did interrupt you, but I wanted to jump on the potential misperception, because I see a lot of misperception on self-organized companies, that a lot of people think it's anarchy in self-service. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, it's also not that we work without hierarchy. So in our OKRs, we have a hierarchy. We also have a hierarchy in our circles. But it's based on competency and not on power and not on people. It's not a person hierarchy. It's a competency hierarchy and the purpose hierarchy. And the transparency that Hans Christian just called out is super important, that you have these roles clearly defined, and every role are the accountabilities of these roles and the purpose of the role defined. And this feeds again into this purpose hierarchy. And so this transparency also makes it a lot easier to give feedback. And I'm not saying that we are there yet, but in an ideal world, I think, and just like you said in your answer to my question, Irina, you knew who in the team is contributing more and who is less. And that is sometimes not even quantifiable, because I believe in constructivism. So I don't think that there's this one reality and that a line manager can see who's performing or not, but a whole team has a pretty good gut feeling if somebody is trying to cut some slacks and just enjoys to not work as much as the others. And then the team dynamics in a healthy team would ensure that there is feedback given and that this person either changes and contributes more because he or she is recognizing, oh shit, the people see what I do or what I don't see, or they would maybe look for a different company, team, whatever. And this, in an ideal world, for me, this would happen like that. I don't say that we are there yet, but we really encourage a lot to give feedback. And so that it's not one person, and that the power is bundled in one role or one person, which is the line manager or how you want to call it. But there are team dynamics that also ensure that I believe in intrinsic motivation. I don't think that somebody is laying back and saying, yeah, I let the others work. There's usually a reason. Maybe there's somebody sick in the family. Maybe the role is not matching. We're all psychologic. There's a logic reason for behavior usually. But anyways, it's not okay. We are not a charity company, so everybody needs to fulfill their accountabilities and their roles. Otherwise, the others have to work harder, which is not fair.
Yeah.
So this giving feedback and being very, not nice, but honest with each other is very important.
Not nice, but honest. I like that. How, just on the, I'm curious around the perception of fairness. Is that something that you measure somehow with your teams? What is the sentiment?
You mean fairness
Really?
in terms of salary fairness?
Yeah, just in general. Also, I mean, obviously, I think it's this performance evaluation is probably where the perception of fairness normally kicks in, and it's like activated on like, well, who gets paid what, who gets what recognition and whatnot. So all of those things, and it's always a very sensitive topic, and it's kind of like the beauty, it's in the eye of the beholder always. But I'm just curious how, like, do these practices increase the perception of fairness, or is there kind of this turbulence period while people are still trying to align on what does fair mean to them and how do they achieve that collectively.
You want to go first, Christian?
No, I'm just actually trying to find the employee surveys. I think there was a fairness question in the two. So happy for you to go first, Philly.
So for me, this is an interesting question because my master thesis 100 years ago was about procedural and distributive justice, which is shown in many studies is that the procedural justice, so the criteria that are set, the transparency and the how things are distributed, is a lot more important to people than the distributive justice. So the end result, like the outcome. So in a soccer game, you would say a match can be 2-0, but it's more important how it came to this result. Was the judge fair? How engaged were the people playing? Was the other team trying a lot harder, but the team that won was only lucky? So that are the more important criteria. And I think there we say, for example, transparency per default. So we try to be as transparent as possible. So, for example, all our meeting minutes are minuted during the meeting by a transparency master and are then saved automatically in HoloSpirit, in the system, in the software we are using. And this transparency helps a lot. Of course, this also sometimes causes more questions. And then we have AMAs, Ask Me Anything, where the people can ask anything. And also sometimes topics like that pop up. And the people say, yeah, sometimes that feeling is not entirely fair, that people that are contributing more are not as much rewarded more. And then we try to follow up on these conversations and what exactly do you mean? And where should we adjust something? And where are we not fair? And maybe have Christian found fairness question in this survey.
No, I think it's also a good reference that actually the discussion about performance and contribution and how do we reward it, individual A versus individual E, this was exactly one of the AMA questions, and I was very happy it was raised because it could actually help us to have a little bit of more dialogue and follow up. I mean, generally speaking, fairness is always, I think you said also, the eye of the beholder. I think we try to as much as we can always with transparency and information sharing. Also when we think about this is, I mentioned the merit increase discussion that we're having. I think we've had a lot of discussion about fairness and justice in that one, and how do we can we make sure that the procedural justice is warranted, so all the transparency is there, so it doesn't become a decision of someone in a locked room. That would, where I think is usually where the problems lie. I mean, also when even the traditional line managers in many companies don't really have the decision right. They hand over their data to someone else and get the information who should be fired, who's getting what percentage. And it sometimes even didn't occur to me when I was in these companies and why was this decision made, but I was selected to be the person who should communicate it, and I didn't even have a rationale to communicate. So that's really bad. And that's why I think the procedural justice will help. And we did actually have a discussion about fairness and IND actually in our engagement score in our employment survey, actually where we ask about things like feeling comfortable to voice opinions even if they're different from others, which is basically making sure you are open for diverse opinions. How do you get support? How do we value diversity? Being myself at work and that. And I'm looking forward to the repetition of our employment survey coming up in due course.
How many people are you now?
200.
About 200.
Do you think the system works independent of the size of organization?
I knew you would ask that. It's the most common question I'm getting. It's interesting.
What is your answer?
The most common answer I'm giving. But I'm happy to go first. I do think that, well, first of all, I think what the difference for us is we started the company and not try to transform it. So I think it's a question of where your starting positions are. I definitely think that in a smaller company, let's say pivoting and safe enough to try would probably easier to experiment with than if we were a company of 100,000 people. Now, maybe to compare ourselves to the journey of Bayer, who are now doing a transformation to what they call dynamic shared ownership, which I think in essence is not too far from how we are operating on how they want to operate. But I think that definitely is a very different challenging endeavor, because you're transforming an organization of 60,000 is the question of how to reach. I think in the earlier part of our conversation, I think you, Irina, said maturity, and I think it's readiness. And I think that the question is, I think that it requires a certain level of approach and mindset and individual consideration and openness to it and the willingness to unlearn, which at the end of the day is also not for everyone. I think it was also one of my fundamental misassumptions when I started this journey, that I thought, wow, this will be great for everyone. But I don't think this is great for everyone, because people will be also happy to be preferably working in the system they used to operate and that they know, and where they don't want to ask themselves questions about self-development. And that's totally okay, because everything is kind of okay. And that's where I think bigger organizations may just struggle, especially if they're in transformation, is to how to reach the heart and soul of the individual in such a journey, which I think will be fundamental. But other than that, I don't believe new work doesn't have a company limit. I don't think this is only for small and medium-sized enterprise. In fact, you see all corporates trying to implement new ways of working to a large degree. And there's ample opportunities outside of looking at Corporate Rebel, the book, there's a couple of great examples on Wuzhou or also Haya in China, who basically work at kind of similar systems, although maybe identical. Mm-hmm. But that's why I also believe about new work. In any case, you have to make it fit and tailor it to your needs and adapt it. There's no textbook prescription, and this is how you should do this. I think it has to be authentic and work.
Yeah, it sounds like it comes to a lot of communication, transparency, and experimentation.
And learning, yeah.
Did I miss anything on the company size?
I'm not sure, to be honest, where there should be limits. I think there might, as far as I know, in literature, they're often telling that you can, in bigger companies, easier implement that when you try to build smaller systems. So when you kind of slice the elephant and find smaller systems to make this purpose and responsibility still more impactful. Because this is the risk in a bigger company, I think, that you just lose the overview, you lose the purpose, you think, the people out there just decide something. And I think it's hard to implement just elements of new ways of working without shifting the whole setup and the culture, because then it becomes meaningless. If you speak about psychological safety and nonviolent communication and self-evaluation, and then you still have some very hierarchically working mechanisms where you're punished for being too open or too open to show also maybe where you failed, this cannot work. I mean, then it feels just like worse, because then you feel like trapped. Try to open me up, and then I open up and I'm being punished for it. Yeah. So I think you really need to be sure. To be honest, I think it's also sometimes a tricky decision, because who decides on you want to work less hierarchically? In a hierarchical organization, the leader of the company makes this as a hierarchical decision, and that in itself makes it sometimes hard for people to believe in it. I mean, the lucky in 1023 is that we started like that, at least in the majority of the company. We built that from the beginning. And we have a CEO that really strongly believes in that with his values. I don't want to pamper you, Hans Christian, but it makes a huge difference if you have somebody who starts a company and says, I stand for that, and they stand behind that. That is a different game than if you're not sure about why somebody would like to change to agile ways of working. If it's just a cost-saving program, or that makes a difference.
Also, there's no limit for currently. I mean, 1023 will probably grow in size of the company, number of colleagues that we have in the organization. I mean, there's no intention to say once we pass 500 people, we should we should stop doing that, etc. I mean, that's part of the journey. That's part of the journey. But if you're 500 people, then transforming to this will probably be a different endeavor than if you're 6 people.
Yeah. Okay. So you'll need to figure out different house of
Different house, and to me also the starting point, and I think to Felix' point, how is it supported across the organization? You can speak a lot about unbossing, but if it's not lived and across the organization, then it becomes difficult.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we are almost at 90-minute mark, so I think as much as I'd be happy to continue bombarding you with questions, we probably need to wrap up. Any final learnings that you would like to share with people who maybe right now have the old kind of bell curve performance evaluation system and might want to shift a little bit to a different way of doing things?
I would love to say that don't underestimate the intrinsic motivation of people, and also how self-critical people are. Because my experience in these self-evaluation dialogues was often that the people rated themselves on a scale from 1 to 10 at 5, 6-ish. Because they knew there is no money connected to it. There is I can be open here, and then they are very critical. And then I often ask, why didn't you rate yourself a 9 or a 10? And then the people say, yeah, because better is always possible. And I'm new, but I didn't connect to as many people as I wanted to. They're very self-critical. And I usually start to encourage them more to celebrate what they did and where they were successful, and to focus on the strength and the positive part, because they are usually very hard on themselves. And this is one of my essences that I took away from some of those conversations, how self-critical people are, and that it's nice to have a system that encourages a positive view on themselves.
Yeah, I would probably start if you want to move into the journey of a more kind of new work kind of performance assessment system. I don't think it should be a system in itself that is just sitting next to everything else, be very different. So I would probably start by the question of who are you? Who do you want to be as a company, as from a values and culture perspective? And obviously it needs to fit, and then start somewhere, define it by getting a lot of inputs from everywhere, stealing with pride, and then go make it safe enough to try, just get started, and then welcome for feedback and pivot as you need to as you need to do it. But I don't think it's a singular mechanism that should be built around this, and everything else in the company would be. I mean, it needs to be really consistent.
Yeah. So it's really about the mindset of exploration and holistic approach to the entire organization.
Yeah.